in general, they just say that what is destined has happened. It's it's actually a way. And when I was young, I used to fight when these elders in the family said such things, because I was like, what do you mean what is destined will happen? So can I not make a change? The same old question. So I understand where this question comes from, of free will versus destiny. But as I've grown older and as I've read a lot more, I've understood the traditional thing, what they are trying to say, and I kind of think that's the one that makes sense. Namaste. Hi, everyone. So, recently Sadhguru released this book called Karma, which I'm sure you've heard of because it's also a bestseller and stuff. And if you were interested in such a video, you must be knowing about it. So I was very excited to read about it, and I have been listening to Sadhguru from a long time, so I could a lot of stuff on karma that he's spoken, I already know. In fact, some of these chapters when I was reading, I actually heard him speak in more detail in some of the satsangs. So the book had actually little less detail. Maybe in the latter part they've covered some of it. I haven't finished it. Actually, there was a certain thing that was rankling in my mind about this book, because this tagline, if you see, a yogi's guide to crafting your destiny, I found it a little bit catering to the West, to be honest, because this whole thing about crafting our own destiny, we don't really, at least in the local Indian culture, I don't think we are going on these lines. West, I think they have been debating a lot about this free will and destiny, and even in some of the movies, it's like this major theme. But in Indian, I know maybe the younger generation would be using it, but in terms of at least what I know my parents are saying and the traditional understanding, there is not much of debate between free will and destiny, because a lot of people have given a pretty clear answer. In general, they just say that what is destined has happened. It's it's actually a way. And when I was young, I used to fight when these elders in the family said such things, because I was like, what do you mean what is destined will happen? So can I not make a change? The same old question. So I understand where this question comes from, of free will versus destiny. But as I've grown older and as I've read a lot more, I've kind of I've understood the traditional thing, what they are trying to say, and I kind of think that's the one that makes sense. This one point actually of Sadhguru also, because earlier also he has addressed videos and this is one topic where I don't know, I somehow listen to him and I don't get what exactly he is trying to say. And I have heard the other traditional stuff, Ramana Maharshi, what he says, and in Jainism, what is the understanding, and I read the Aghori books. In that, what I've read, all of that made sense to me, and more or less everyone is saying the same thing, except Sadhguru kept speaking about it in a different words. I think he was using different words and nomenclature for it, and I was not able to grasp like what is he exactly saying. And this whole thing about crafting destiny feels it is all catering to the West, and also it's an English language, right? So maybe that is why, because it's a predominantly English book that he's writing, they have used the Western kind of terminology possibly. So I just want to talk a little bit about this topic here. I will do a little bit of book reading from this Karma book also, because in this book, I finally got clear what he is trying to say, and that what he's saying is not that different from what is understood from all of these other people, other yogis also. And that is correct, because after all, there is one truth and all of these people say it in a different way. And it is very, very important that they say it in a different way, because we will understand it. Certain things we'll understand very quickly. Certain times we'll not understand what they're trying to say. So it is good for us that they are giving us in all these different forms. So we can grasp it better. People of different times are able to relate to different yogis and what they are saying. So we are understanding the same truth, but we are getting it in different packages, and that is great for us. So definitely appreciate Sadhguru for putting not just karma, but so many topics. He has reworded them, and it is very useful. A lot of things which traditionally we have rejected because we felt it didn't make sense. We all of a sudden heard Sadhguru speak about it, and all of a sudden it is, of course, this makes sense. And then once you understand it better, you realize it is the same thing the older people was saying. It's just we didn't understand it, or people have misunderstood it so much that it's very difficult to go back and rethink it. So let me start this by what Ramana Maharshi has said about free will and destiny, because this was one of the first things which just became super clear for me. I don't have any of his books with me right now. Those books are in Coimbatore. I'm not there right now. So I took this excerpt from an online source and I'm reading it. This is from a book called Talks with Ramana Maharshi. I think I'll drop a link in the description. So this is basically somebody has written down the Q&A with Ramana, which is common. It's one of the first books I read about of Ramana Maharshi was called Day to Day with Ramana Maharshi, and it was a question answer session that was recorded. The actual Q&A he did with his devotees who visited him. So it's a very wonderful one, and I'll just read this one. So in that, this person asks, is there predestination? And if what is destined to happen will happen, is there any use in prayer or effort, or should we just remain idle? This is the crux, right? This is the main thing that everyone is getting muddled about. So what Ramana Maharshi says is, there are only two ways in which to conquer destiny or be independent of it. Basically, you either even conquer destiny or you be independent of it. One is to inquire who undergoes this destiny and discover that only the ego is bound by it and not the self, and that the ego is non-existent. And other way is to kill the ego by completely surrendering to the Lord, by realizing one's helplessness and saying all the time, not I, but thou, O my Lord, and giving up all sense of I and mine and leaving it to the Lord to do what he likes with you. Surrender can never be regarded as complete so long as the devotee wants this or that from the Lord. True surrender is love of God for the sake of love and for nothing else, not even for the sake of salvation. In other words, complete effacement of the ego is necessary to conquer destiny. Whether you achieve this effacement through self-inquiry or through bhakti marg. So basically, in both these alternatives that Ramana has given, thing is that it's an internal situation which we need to develop. Either through self-inquiry, we develop a certain state of Gnan, or through devotion, we develop an internal state of bhakti. So either ways, we are changing the situation. So another, this the writer has written and about another young man from Colombo, Ceylon, who said to Bhagwan, they call Ramana Maharshi as Bhagwan, J. Krishnamurti teaches the method of effortless and choiceless awareness as distinct from that of deliberate concentration. Would Sri Bhagwan be pleased to explain how best to practice meditation and what form the object of meditation should take? So in this, Ramana says, effortless and choiceless awareness is a real nature. If we can attain that state and abide in it, that is all right. But one cannot reach it without effort. The effort of deliberate meditation. All the age-old vasanas, inherent tendencies, turn the mind outwards to external objects. All such thoughts have to be given up and the mind turned inwards, and that for most people requires effort. Of course, every teacher and every book tells the aspirant to keep quiet, but it is not easy to do. That is why all this effort is necessary. Even if we find somebody who has achieved the supreme state of stillness, you may take it that the necessary effort had already been made in a previous life. So effortless and choiceless awareness is attained only after deliberate meditation. That meditation can take whatever form most appeals to you. See what helps you to keep out all other thoughts and adopt that for your meditation. So the reason this part of this second answer is relevant to our previous conversation is because in the previous conversation, he is saying that, can we change destiny? And if we can't change it, what is the use of doing anything? So what he is saying that we have only two choices with regards to destiny. Either we change our mind or we change our heart and we basically surrender to the destiny, to God, or we bring in the necessary Gnan that This is only happening to my ego and myself is separate. The thing is that these two solutions that have been given to reach these states, we have to do certain actions. How do we cultivate bhakti? Thus, there will be certain actual actions that will happen for us. And that's what he's speaking in the second answer, where someone is saying, can we simply be aware and observe? So he's saying, definitely you can. That is our internal nature. However, to reach that state, we would need to do certain deliberate actions, some meditation forms which make sense to us. And then through these slow steps, we would eventually reach the solution we are looking for with regards to destiny. So this was Ramana Maharshi's response on these matters. And of course, he has addressed this whole question many times. The very first time I read this from him, it was actually a much more simpler and much more smaller answer. I think 2-3 lines he has explained. Basically, he said the same thing, that you can't change the external situations, but you can change the internal situation. And that makes all the difference. Aghori Vimalananda, in the Aghora books, also pretty much covers the same thing. He says that we can, if there are certain things this time, we can't really change it. However, he does keep a little room for the kind of beings who really know how to play with destiny. They are capable of a lot more. And the example he gives is, I can't do a reading of Vimalananda actually, because finding that section and explaining it's just too time consuming. I don't know where to search for it. I'm just giving you what I remember about it. He gave the example of Hanumanji. In Ramayana, Hanumanji has to cross the ocean to reach Lanka. You know, when Rama and everyone was in search of Sita, Ravana had abducted Sita. These guys were searching for Sita, and Hanumanji flew to Lanka. While he was flying to Lanka, in the middle, this one Rakshasa or some demon basically blocked his path. And that demon, he saw Hanumanji was flying, so he opened the mouth, and Hanumanji, basically he wanted to eat Hanumanji up. And Hanumanji flew into the mouth of the demon. Now what Vimalananda said is that this particular thing, that Hanumanji will have to enter the mouth of this particular demon, was set. It could not be changed. It was destiny. It was destiny. However, what he said is that Hanumanji played it. What he did was, he did enter the mouth of the demon. However, he cut through the mouth and came out from the other side, and he continued flying. So there is that tiny room to change something, but it's obviously not an easy task. Like what Hanumanji did over there was Herculean, because you know, that demon was very, very powerful, but Hanumanji was a different level of person. So he was able to cut through the mouth, and so the destined situation did take place. However, the outcome was very different from what one would expect. And the outcome, one can say, would not be destined, because destiny was just that he will enter this person's mouth. The destiny was not that he will die by this person's hand, for example. So in that sense, Vimalananda says you do have room to play around. However, it's a very tiny room, and yeah, it requires some kind of special skills and stuff. That was my take from what Vimalananda said. But otherwise, it's the same thing, that by and large, everything in destiny is predestined, and our internal situation is completely in our hands, and that makes a big difference. The third example I wanted to give about was Jainism, and I have been listening to talks and understanding also a bit of the philosophy of Jainism, which is very deep, very detailed, very all-encompassing in a lot of ways. In that also, it's very clear that you cannot really change the present, because what they say is that your present, whatever this lot of life that we've got is actually an effect of our past karma. So in general, that effect will already happen, because you already accumulated that cause, and that effect was happening right now. So you can't really change that. But again, it's your internal situation that you will change. You will change what you do going forward, and thus the karmic accumulation going forward changes. Thus your future lot may change. That's largely it. But probably at some other time, I'll do a little bit of book reading from Dada Bhagwan's books also. That will give you some idea of what exactly he's saying, because the way they put it is much better than how I have put it. But I'm just trying to make a point that through these various parts, what is being told is largely similar. They use different words. They also give different information sometimes. But as I was saying, one truth spoken in different ways. So it's great. So now I will read this little bit of the Karma book by Sadhguru. This section, when I read it, finally, after such a long time, I understood what Sadhguru is saying. As I said, because I have been listening to Sadhguru Satsang since ages like 2005, when I did my first inner engineering program with Sadhguru. And uh, uh, I've listened to lots and lots of satsangs by him. At that time, YouTube and all wasn't even there, but I've just attended a lot of satsangs because I spent a lot of time in the ashram around those years. And then, of course, YouTube came, so I used to watch those. And this particular topic, I was always little, baffled by it. Like, what exactly is saying? I just couldn't grasp it for some reason. And this, when I read this section, I get it. And especially when I started this book, I was a little skeptical, okay? Because this whole thing about crafting your own destiny is like, really, what is this crafting your own destiny? We all know that everything is predestined and you can only change your internal situation. So what is this thing of crafting our own destiny anyways? So I'm going to read from page 40. And yeah, this particular section is called Why Do Some People Suffer More Than Others? But I'm not reading it from the beginning. I'm reading it from a particular section. Generally, the word karma is used in a rudimentary way to suggest that you did something bad and so bad things will happen to you. This is a very limited and simplistic way of looking at life. Karma has nothing to do with moralistic categories of good and bad. It is related only to cause and effect. If a man comes to you now and complains that his heart is clogged up, is it because he committed some terrible deeds in his past? No. It is much more likely that he lived irresponsibly, ate and drank improperly, and messed up his system. So this is bad karma in its own way, because he lived without necessary understanding about how to treat his system. Ignorance is also a karma. As action is karma, inaction is also karma. Someone recently came to me and told me about a dear friend of his who had lost the use of his hand. Now, the accident was unfortunate, but the real question is not about how many hands you have. The real question is whether you are suffering them. So you see, again, it's about external versus internal. External is that you lost the use of your hand. But the question is whether you're suffering them. Suffering is internal. So how is your internal situation? Many Hindu gods and goddesses are presented in iconography and calendar art with 4 or more hands. It is highly likely that if you were granted 4 hands, you would suffer that as well. You wouldn't think you were a god. You would think you were a freak, and you would suffer that for sure. I knew someone who had an extra finger and always had this hand stuffed in his pocket. Why? The finger didn't hurt. It had no problem. It was perfectly fine. The problem was just that everyone else has 10, so he felt weird. So it is not 9 fingers or 11 that someone is suffering. It is just that he is creating his own suffering out of comparison. This is a psychological game. Some 7 miles from the Isha Yoga Center in Coimbatore, some 7 miles from Isha Yoga Center in Coimbatore, India, is a police station. About 25 years ago, it was manned by about 8 to 9 policemen. Today, it has about 14 policemen. This situation is in charge of 250,000 people. The police don't have a patrol car and they don't carry guns. At any given time, around 3 to 4 policemen are on leave. Another 3 are on night duty. So only about 7 to 8 are actually at the police station. If you call them at night, one of them will ride over on a bicycle or else ask you to come to the police station to give a statement. You don't have much law enforcement machinery here, but you don't have much crime either. Many of the villages in this area led economically impoverished lives, but they are largely peaceful and happy people. They probably see people driving to the Isha Yoga Center in nice cars, sometimes in Mercedes Benzes and Bentleys. But they aren't in despair or envy about their lot. There is the odd crime, usually a family feud or some other caste clashes. But the incidence of felony or murder for money is extremely low. These people may not have a conscious spiritual process, but a certain ethos has percolated deep into their psyches. For them, this is their karma. They see their life as they're doing, and so they feel no need to take something that belongs to another or to covet another's possessions. Now, I don't want to romanticize poverty. One could argue that this kind of thinking could lead to fatalism and passivity. A certain dynamism certainly needs to be reinfused into the understanding of karma. It is important for people to feel that if their poverty is of their making, they can also turn it around. Karma means that you can change your destiny, not simply be ruled by it. But at the same time, there is something wonderful about this ability to create joy in all kinds of circumstances. These people may be poor, but they are not suffering. Suffering and misery are always by choice. Physical pain has, of course, to be handled in a very particular way. But suffering is only of the mind. If you are suffering mentally, it means that you are the source of your own suffering. You are the manufacturer of your own anguish. The karmic substance within you may happen to contain all the necessary ingredients to create suffering. Perhaps you planted all these ingredients unconsciously in your past. So what can you do about this today? The answer is simple. Don't manufacture suffering for yourself today. Maybe terrible things happened to you yesterday. Maybe you lost everything that is precious to you. But this morning when you get up, you still have the choice not to manufacture suffering for yourself. Yes, the ingredients of misery are present. They are waiting, perhaps even tempting you, but they cannot become suffering by themselves. Suffering has to be freshly baked every day. In other words, your karma cannot turn into suffering without your cooperation. Once you are aware, that is the end of your suffering. So the source of your misery is not your past actions. The source of your misery is how you're processing the imprint of the past now. You may be carrying around a sack full of stinking garbage. Either you can smear yourself with it and get terribly miserable, or you can make good manure out of it and create a wonderful garden. Karma is the seed. What you are going to make out of this seed is entirely up to you. If I am given a packet of assorted seeds and I throw them all into my garden, perhaps all of them will sprout. Some of the mango seeds will yield very sweet fruit, but there may be some bitter seeds too. The Partinium grass may be an unwelcome seed, unwelcome weed, and yet I still have the choice to pull it out. I can remove what is superfluous and keep the rest. That is how your food is grown every day. A large part of agriculture is just weeding. There are actually more weeds than plants growing even in your own garden. If you keep weeding, you will have a garden. If you sit back defeated, you will have a patch of weeds. Well, of course, some have learned to enjoy the weeds too. The same holds true for your life. You have your seed karma, but you also have your weeding karma. This is where volition comes in. This is where intention becomes paramount. If you decide not to perform your weeding karma, your life will be just an overgrown wilderness. If you choose to perform this simple function, your life could yield an incredibly rich harvest. So you see, this section, when I read it, I got it. I mean, I don't mean got it in some ultimate way. I just mean that it's the same thing he's saying. He's saying that whatever karma, whatever the past karmic seeds, whatever I had to deliver to you, it delivered it. But you choose whether you are suffering it or not suffering it. So it's again your internal situation. So basically, external will be the way it is, but you choose how to deal with it internally. Main thing is we are looking at cultivating a particular inner situation. Then whether the external changes, whether the external happens the same way, it really we just ensure the inner situation is a certain way, and that's the answer to this whole conundrum. And yeah, it's just amazing. I was so happy to finally read this section because as I said, that tagline of the book was getting me a little bit skeptical, but I knew actually I just didn't like the tagline or how they have framed it. But I knew Sadhguru would be saying, it's not like he's going to come up with the new stuff, because that's how this knowledge is, that's how thankfully in our Indian history, we have such rich spirituality, such rich beings have come in, they have given us so much gnan. And we will see, if we do a proper study of all these various things, we come to a point where they're saying the same thing. They're saying things in a different way. And sometimes they're highlighting different activities. Like Someone may highlight bhakti as a marga while someone is talking about gnana as a marga. But then at the same time, we will get the literature which will give us a synopsis of all these margas and explain it in short what role each of the marga is playing, and each of the marga proper. It's just that they have a little different approach to the whole situation, what we call the path of moksha liberation. They approach it a little differently. So it is just amazing. I just love it. It's I know for certain people they don't like mixing things up, but then at the same time there are people like me and maybe you, because if you're watching my videos, you may also like the fact that we do draw from a lot of different sources, and all these sources are the ones that we consider authentic. Why we feel they're authentic have a lot of parameters to it, but we feel they're authentic. You take a Ramana Maharshi, we take these Aghora books, which in the spiritual circle fairly it's considered authentic. Jainism, the whole depth that I'm getting, I consider this source an authentic source. Sadhguru, authentic source. So we look at these various things, and as long as it doesn't create a conflict within us, as long as we are able to assimilate it and they help us, they bolster us to walk the same path that we have been walking, it is a beautiful thing. And yeah, I hope you enjoy this.